Well, on Fanalysis, we take the deep analytics made famous in fantasy football and combine them with the betting trends to find the best angle for every NFL game. And this is championship weekend, just 2 games, and the lines couldn't be sharper. So to give us some perspective, we bring in a sports handicapper known on Twitter as Old Man Who Bets. Geoff Sheasby joins us once again. This, to me, is like the best weekend of the year in the NFL. 2 games, so much riding on it, and these 2 games will likely be better than what we might see in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, better than the Super Bowl. I would argue that last weekend before, the best weekend of football because we have Saturday and Sunday games.
Have at least 2 days.
So I get just a little bit more action there. But you said it. I mean, 2 great matchups this week. It's going to be hard to beat that Chiefs game last week after 24-0, and then they come back and score close to 40 unanswered. Thankfully, I was on the Chiefs minus 9.5, so I had a bit of a heart attack in the first quarter.
Down 21-0.
Yeah, and sprinkled a little bit on the 8.5 alt line when they were down 14-0 at plus 300, so that was wonderful. But nonetheless, when it hit 21-0 and then 24-0, I was like, I can't be putting any more money on this game. I'm going to zoom out, and thankfully it regressed, and the Chiefs roared back.
That's actually a great point, because on championship weekend, when you only have 2 games, are you more apt to do in-game betting?
I wouldn't say more apt. It's easier because you're watching those a little bit more intensely, so you're getting kind of the game flow where if you don't have Sunday ticket or at a sports bar with all the games going, it's hard to really lock in on what's happening with red zone. So you can really get a feel for the game. And again, at 14-0, I was like, okay, the Chiefs are definitely coming back. At 21-0, I was like, oh boy, this is a repeat of the Ravens game the day before. Like, I don't want any more of my money on this. But thankfully, we got maybe not lucky. The Texans' defense was poor, as we chatted about.
Yeah.
And the outcome was what we anticipated.
Well, both home teams, I should say, are touchdown favorites in this one. So let's start things off with that Chiefs and the Titans game. Chiefs are giving the Titans 7 points. A majority of the bets are on the favorites. Does it allow you to take advantage of maybe fading the public a little bit here? Yeah, I love fading the public this week. The Titans last week kind of did their best Chiefs impression. They were down 10-0 early, and they came back and rallied against the Chiefs in that first matchup. And this Titans team, I mean, they are the hottest team in football. Hard to bet against them. Thinking about at 5.5-point favorites here, I don't think it's necessarily a strong or a weak line. It kind of just is in that first game. And then now at 7, it's moving a little bit towards the Chiefs. But I was betting against the Titans because I was sold that some team is going to sell out and stop Mr. Henry. I thought the Pats would do it. I thought the Ravens would do it. Both of those teams have very good defenses, and now we insert the Chiefs. They are 29th in the league in terms of defensive rush efficiency. Henry went off for 188 yards and 2 scores the first time they played. His last 3 games have been historic: 211 yards, 182 yards, 195 yards. How can we not continue to ride that hot hand? Obviously on the other side of the ball, the Chiefs can score early and often. We saw them last week with an absolute barrage outside of that first quarter. And what's really interesting is when we look at both of these teams' strengths. Obviously, Tennessee, it's the run D. The weakness of the Chiefs would be, or the run offense, excuse me. The weakness of the Chiefs would be their run D, and then it's kind of vice versa, with the Chiefs' offense being more on the pass-heavy side and the Titans' secondary being weak. So I do expect this to be a shootout. To love the over at 53, but nonetheless, I think looking at these points, the deltas between those, 6th and 8th, and then I think it was 13th and 16th in terms of overall ratings. I think 7 points is just too much. Well, okay, so that means that the Titans are going to have to score at least 30 points. You have to expect the Titans to score at least 30 points if they're going to keep up with the Chiefs. Do you feel like their game plan is much the same as what they've tried to do in this postseason here? Keep the ball out of the hands of the offense by handing it off to Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I mean, Henry is just eating chunks of yardage. We said last week he was looking like John Henry going through tunnels, laying down the train track.
There you go.
I think he's going to continue to do that. There's no sign of them stopping down. And obviously last week, not a great rushing performance by the Texans, but that's Carlos Hyde, that's Duke Johnson. That's not Henry. Henry is a beast among men. He is absolutely massive. His strides are longer than my torso. It's just outrageous.
Yeah, we used to think, listen, when I was a kid, we talked about how Earl Campbell had these massive 44-inch thighs. I'm telling you what, put Derrick Henry out there versus Earl Campbell, I would rather face Earl Campbell than Derrick Henry.
Fair.
I mean, he's as big of a beast as you can possibly get. You are on the side of the Titans, and you expect this to be a shootout then.
I do. I mean, looking at the first game, it was 35-32 between both of these teams.
And Tennessee's put up 40 points more often. I think they've done it 3 times this year where they've covered that.
Yeah, I mean, Henry, again, in these last 3 games has scored, 4 or 5 touchdowns.
Sure.
He is just eating. I think as long as Tannehill can limit his turnovers, which he's done a fantastic job this year, they're probably not even going to need him to throw the ball. He's thrown for, 70 yards, 80 yards the last couple of games.
He threw 83 yards in this last game.
And they absolutely dominated.
People are talking about how he's a much better quarterback now that he knows how long he has out of him. He threw for 83 yards.
Yeah,
how is he that much of a better of a quarterback?
But he has looked good in times when he needed to look good, and I think that's important. Obviously, when you have a guy like Henry, you don't really need him to look good that often. And I think it's so interesting, we talk about it's a passing league, and all of a sudden you have the Ravens who run more than any team has in the last 10 years, and then obviously Henry here is just putting on a clinic.
Well, we're going to find out because it's a passing team versus a running team.
Absolutely.
So to make these weekend games, I guess the championship weekend games, so much more entertaining, maybe this is the week where we dip into the props. So I'd like to throw a couple of props at you.
Sure.
And I want to see your thoughts on this one. A.J. Brown. We got a couple of them here for A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown over under 62.5.
The 62.5, I'm going to take the under.
Okay.
I'm only concerned on that because one catch of his can be 50, 60 yards. These last couple of games, he had hardly any yards because they're not throwing the ball. I don't think that game script is going to change this week. If you think that the Chiefs are going to get out early, maybe lean towards that over, but I don't think they are. I think it's going to be just a dogfight from the start. Henry's going to eat, Henry's going to eat, Henry's going to eat, which means A.J. Brown will not.
Okay, would you take a chance at a plus 325 for him to have a 100-yard game?
That is a nice little, sitting at the bar bet, and that's a lot of fun. I wouldn't put too much money on it, but if you're going to take the over, might as well, go for the grand slam here. Again, he's the type of guy that he only needs 2 catches, maybe 3 catches to get there.
Yeah.
So with that kind of variance, I do think if I was going to take an over here, I'd look for one of the alt lines.
Wow, see, now that's interesting. Under 62, but over 100 at a plus 325.
And then he's going to land right at 75
right,
for 2 losses.
He's going to miss both of them.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we turn our attention now to the NFC Championship. The Niners, 7.5 point favorites on Green Bay. How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, we saw this matchup once again. It's 3 p.m. start time out in the Bay. It's going to be a beautiful day. 3 p.m. is the perfect time for the spectator. It allows them to sleep in a little bit. It allows them to get their brunch in, maybe a couple mimosas, maybe a couple of beers, and they head over to Levi's Stadium. This place is going to be hellish. It's going to be merciless. The San Francisco 49ers, I think, are going to absolutely bring it. They beat them by 29 the first time, and I'm expecting a similar outcome this time. When we look at the teams here, the Niners have done pretty much everything that they've needed to do this year. They've beaten up on the bad teams. They've covered and beaten the good teams, and I think a lot of that comes from this defense. When we look at their home and away ratings based on team rankings, power ratings, they're the #1 team at home this year. Green Bay, fine on the road, number 10 or 12, excuse me. But nonetheless, I don't think that's going to be enough. When we're looking at the efficiency stats, we do see very similar efficiencies on offense, with San Francisco coming in at 7th, Green Bay coming in at 8th. But on the other side of the ball, San Francisco is 2nd in defense in terms of defensive efficiency, Green Bay at 15th. That is a very large delta, and that's why I don't mind taking that hook at 7.5. I wouldn't mind buying it down to 7 for minus 120, but when we think about kind of the game flow here, Aaron Rodgers, we love Aaron Rodgers. We've talked about Aaron Rodgers. We've talked about the Packers. I took the Packers to win the division. They won the division. I bet on them a lot
But
this year.
you can't bet with emotion here.
Exactly. I'm eliminating emotion and thinking about it. The secondary of the Niners has been absolutely dominant. Aaron Jones has gotten a lot better in these last couple weeks. I think in the last 3 weeks of the season, he was topping over 100 a couple times. But in their first matchup, he only had 38 yards. Aaron Rodgers only threw for 107 yards. The combination of them being able to sell out the run, double team Devontae Adams, and then pressure like crazy doesn't leave Rodgers with that many options. I don't think Geronimo Allison is going to be the X factor. I don't think MVS is going to be the X factor. Jimmy Graham looks like he doesn't even want to be in the league anymore. And then who else do we have? Lazard, a fine receiver, but not the weapons that we're used to seeing. We look at Tom Brady again, not the weapons that we're used to seeing. Breeze was great for the old guard. He had the weapons. Rodgers doesn't have those weapons. So I think that Rodgers is going to end up pretty similarly to our good friend Drew Brees and our good friend Tom Brady, which is on the couch and not going back to Super Bowl.
Speaking of emotion, Aaron Rodgers was famously passed over by the San Francisco 49ers, which is what he considers his hometown team for the #1 overall pick in 2005. And he just basically turned it into a grudge career against the 49ers. Do you think emotion for him this week will work in his benefit or against him?
I mean, he's an ultimate competitor, right? You know, I hope he's wearing his denim jumpsuits, that wonderful Canadian tuxedo coming into this game. But I don't think he's necessarily thinking about him getting snubbed back in 05 into this game. You know, obviously, he's going to do his best. He's going to scramble. He's going to make some plays. But ultimately, I just think they're too depleted on offense and not good enough on defense for this really, really solid San Francisco offense. And when we look at the San Francisco offense, Kittle, one of the best tight ends in the league.
Yeah.
He had 129 yards their first matchup, 6 catches. You know, a really impressive performance. And then on the ground, they've got Mostert, they've got Coleman, they've got Breida. You know, Shanahan deploys a hot hand here. Coleman hadn't had a touch in 3 weeks. He went off last week for what, 2 or 3 touchdowns?
Yeah,
exactly. So, you know, just the many-headed monster of that rushing attack combined with Kittle, maybe Emmanuel Sanders, Deebo Samuel can make plays, and Jimmy G's look good. You know, there were concerns about this being his first ever playoffs, maybe some nerves, hasn't really affected him at all. So the team aspect, I think, of the Niners is just going to be too much to go against essentially Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, and Aaron Jones.
I want to take a deeper dive real quick into the Packers defense. It shows a weakness against play action passes. Seattle had a 77% play action success rate this past week, and the Niners were #1 in play action success rate this year. They seem to do well what the Packers can't stop.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you could probably look for some value in props on here. I think the Niners also do a very good job of putting their team in motion to kind of see where the coverage is going to be. You know, and Kittle went 6 for 129 the first time. I'm expecting a similar output from him. You know, he's unstoppable when he gets the ball. And then, you know, on the rushing side of things, it's hard to really pick who's going to go off, but I think you probably could find some value in Coleman. He might be a little chalky in daily fantasy plays this week because of last week. He was super underpriced and obviously went off. So maybe that's a buyback then on Mostert.
They still have Mostert first.
Yeah, of course.
They still have Mostert, Breida, and then Coleman as the third highest.
Gotcha. Yeah. So he'll probably be owned in 60+% of leagues
because he's a value play at this point.
Exactly.
All right. Let me throw a couple of props and we'll let you go here. First prop: Aaron Rodgers plus or minus 238.
I'm taking the under there at 238. You know, I think he's only going to be able to get the ball to Devontae Adams unless Aaron Jones takes a screen pass 100 yards to the house. I don't think he's going to get there. I see him probably falling into about the 170-yard range here. Again, he had 107 yards, I believe, in their first matchup.
Right.
You know, hard to do worse than that. 238 is pretty low. You know, if it was anything higher than that, I'd probably lean towards the over. Vegas implying that he should be better. But this is a passing attack that hasn't, you know, it's been scrappy and it's been efficient enough, but it hasn't exactly been electric or firework worthy. So I'm going to take the under there.
We talked about play action. The #1 play action target for San Francisco, George Kittle, 75.5. Over under.
I like the over there. You know, even if this game gets out of hand, you know, they still like to throw on those play action passes. So I don't see the Niners putting their foot off the gas at any point, regardless of score. I do think the Niners go up early. I think they cruise, hopefully to an easy cover. I would consider buying the hook. If you can get 7 at -120. That's what I was seeing it earlier this morning. Don't hate it. You know, obviously being able to win just by 1 for a push rather than having to get 2 scores on that cover. But ultimately, I'm comfortable with -7.5 for the Niners.
All right, that's a look at how the championship weekend shakes out from the pro side of things. Make sure to keep an eye on any line changes on sportsline.com. For Geoff Sheasby, I'm Steve Overmyer. This is Fanalysis.